Forget everything you think you know about fairy tale castles and romantic cobblestone streets. Forget the images of knights in shining armor and ladies in flowing gowns. The first thing that would have struck you upon approaching a medieval city was not its beauty, but its smell. A suffocating, physical wave of wood smoke, of human sweat, of animal excrement, and of 1,000 forms of decaying waste. It is a smell that would have caught you by the throat long before you ever passed through its gates, a warning of the dense, chaotic, and dangerous world that lay within. Tonight, we are not taking a tour of a museum. We are not admiring architecture. We are going to a tent to survive. We will learn, step by step, why every shadow held a potential threat, why a simple drink of water could be a death sentence, and why the setting of the sun, for a stranger, was the most terrifying event of all. This is your survival guide for your first and perhaps your last day in a medieval city. Now, before we step through the gates and you get settled for good, if you enjoy this kind of immersive journey into the past, please take a moment to leave a like on the video and to subscribe. Only do so if you find real value in what I do here. I would also love to know what part of the world you're watching from and what time it is where you are, so feel free to let me know in the comments. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. All right, the time has come. Find your most comfortable position. Dim the lights. Let the noise of the modern world fade away and allow yourself to drift, to slip back in time. Our story, your story, begins on a dusty road in the year of our Lord 1348. You have walked for days, your feet aching, your clothes covered in the dust of the road. And finally, there it is, rising on the horizon, the great city of Paris. For hours it has been a smudge on the horizon, a promise as vague as a half-remembered dream, indistinguishable from a low-lying cloud. But now, as the afternoon sun begins its slow descent, painting the sky in softer shades of gold and pale blue, the city resolves itself into something solid, something real. The silhouette is a jagged line of towers and rooftops against the sky, a man-made mountain range of stone and timber. It is a promise of food, of shelter, of civilization after days spent in the lonely open countryside, where the only sounds were the wind in the dry grass and the soft crunch of your own footsteps on the path. But with every step that brings you closer, with every slow mile that passes, the promise transforms, and the details of reality begin to sharpen. The romantic vision of a city of white stone, born from songs and the tales of traveling storytellers, gives way to a harsher truth. The walls, so majestic from afar, reveal their scars up close. They are not a uniform white, but a mottled patchwork of gray and brown stone. Some blocks weathered and dark with age, others lighter, newer. You see evidence of repairs from some forgotten siege, newer stones set crudely against the old, a testament to the city's violent past. Dark, damp patches of green moss cling to the lower courses, a sign of perpetual dampness that seems to crawl up from the moat below. At the top of the walls, the silhouettes of the guards on their rounds become distinct. You can make out the shape of their helmets, the glint of the sun on the tip of a spear. They pace back and forth along the battlements, their movements mechanical and ceaseless, a part of the architecture, indifferent to your approach. The dirt path you have been following for days, a simple track between fallow fields, grows wider, more crowded. You are no longer alone. You are absorbed into a continuous, slow-moving stream of humanity, all converging on this single point. An ox cart, its wooden wheels ungreased and screaming with every agonizing turn, slowly overtakes you. The sound is like a physical pain in your ears. It kicks up a cloud of fine, choking dust that forces you to turn your head and cover your mouth with a sleeve. The peasant leading the oxen doesn't give you a glance. His face is a map of wrinkles and resignation, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, his shoulders slumped with a lifetime of labor. His cart is piled high with cabbages and turnips, the smell of earth clinging to them. Further on, a group of pilgrims, their staffs striking the ground in a soft, rhythmic beat, walk while muttering prayers. Their eyes are fixed on the church spires that pierce the sky above the walls, their expressions a mixture of weariness and ecstatic hope. Their clothes are worn, their faces etched with a piety that seems as much about endurance as it is about faith. A lone messenger on a tired, sweating horse pushes past you and all, his face grim with the importance of his message, shouting for people to make way. He is a reminder that this city is a center of power, a place of urgent news and great consequence. And then the smell hits you. It does not arrive all at once. It comes in waves carried on the breeze. The first note is that of smoke, a general hazy smell of thousands of wood fires, the kind you might find pleasant in a single hearth, but here it is a thick, choking blanket that covers everything. It is the smell of a city breathing out its own fumes. Then, as you draw closer, a more organic, more animal note weaves its way in. It is the smell of thousands of living beings, human and beast, crammed together in a space too small. It is the smell of stables, of pigsties, of chicken coops, which are not outside the city, but inside, in the tiny courtyards, sometimes even on the ground floors of the houses themselves. You can smell the sharp tang of manure, the cloying scent of unwashed wool and sweat. Finally, as you come within a few hundred paces of the gate, the lowest, most persistent note of the city symphony reaches you, the smell of decay. It is the smell of waste thrown from windows into the street, of sewage flowing in open gutters, of the offal and blood from the butcher's stalls. It is the smell of everything fermenting and rotting under the sun. It is a smell that's so thick, so potent, you can almost taste it, a foul coating on your tongue that makes you want to retch. This is the true perfume of the medieval city, an olfactory wall you must pass through before you even reach the one made of stone.
You finally arrive before the St. Jacques Gate, joining the end of a long, slow-moving queue that snakes its way towards the dark archway. The wall, seen from here, is overwhelming. It towers above you, a sheer cliff of stone and mortar, designed to make you feel small and insignificant. High above on the battlements, you can see the guards more clearly now, their movements slow and deliberate. You feel their unseen eyes upon you and upon everyone in this line. The wait is long. The sun beats down and there is no shade. You shift your weight from one aching foot to the other. The conversations around you are a low hum of complaints, of gossip, of weary resignation. You learn more about the city just by listening than you ever could from a map. You hear a woman complaining about the high price of flour. Two men in front of you, reeking of sweat and livestock, argue in a low tone about a debt. A child, tired of waiting, begins to cry, a thin, wailing sound that is quickly shushed by its mother. You observe the gate itself. It is a formidable structure. The wood of the gate is thick oak, bound with heavy iron straps and studded with large, black iron bolts. Above it, you can see the teeth of the portcullis, a heavy iron grill held aloft by thick chains ready to slam down at a moment's notice. The stone of the archway is dark, stained with age and soot. It is a mouth, ready to swallow you whole. The queue inches forward, a frustrating dance of a few steps and then another long wait. You watch the process unfold ahead of you, a slow, methodical ritual of control. A merchant, his 2 mules laden with bales of wool, is deep in a sharp, angry argument with one of the guards. His hands gesture wildly as he tries to negotiate the tax. He fails. He finally pays with a sigh of disgust, throwing a handful of coins onto the guard's collection table. He shoots a dark look at the guard, who ignores it, recounting the coins with a calculated, insulting slowness before waving him through. Behind him, a woman from the countryside, her face weathered and brown from a life in the sun, tries to get a basket of eggs through without paying, pleading poverty. She is roughly pushed back by the guard's gauntlet. An egg falls from her basket and smashes on the ground, a splash of yellow in the dust. The woman stifles a cry, but says nothing more. She knows better than to argue. No one in the queue helps her. No one says a word. Here, you are on your own. Your turn finally comes. You step forward, into the shadow of the gatehouse. The guard before you is a man with a thick neck and a patchy, greasy beard. A scar runs from his left eye to his jaw. His armor is functional, not decorative. A dented helmet, a worn leather jerkin reinforced with iron rings. His eyes are cold, bored, accustomed to judging people in an instant. He is not trying to find out if you are good or bad. He is trying to find out if you are a threat or a source of profit. "State your business," he grunts, his voice devoid of warmth. You explain you are seeking work, perhaps as a laborer, your own voice sounding thin and weak in the open air. He nods slowly, unimpressed. He has heard this story 1,000 times today. "Where from?" he asks. You tell him the name of your distant village. He shows no recognition. To him, anywhere outside this city is simply the countryside. "The tax," he says, not as a question, but as a command. He holds out a dirty, calloused hand. You fumble in your small pouch and produce your single precious copper coin. You place it in his palm. He glances at it, then at you, a flicker of contempt in his eyes for your obvious poverty. He sweeps it to a large leather purse at his belt, which jingles with the day's takings. "Move on," he says, already looking past you to the next person in line. The entire interaction has taken less than a minute. You do not matter. You pass under the arch. The shadow and coolness of the stone envelop you. The sound of the outside world is cut off sharply. The tunnel of the gatehouse is long and dark, the air still and musty. Your footsteps echo on the worn flagstones. You hear the rattling of the portcullis chain above you, a sound of immense, threatening weight. And then you emerge into the street on the other side, and the reality of the city hits you with the force of a physical blow. It is a full-body assault on the senses. The noise is total, a relentless, overwhelming cacophony that slams into you. The shouts of merchants crying their wares, the high-pitched, panicked neighing of horses caught in the throng, the deafening, rhythmic hammering from a blacksmith's forge just a few doors down, the wailing of an infant, sharp and piercing, the incessant, aggressive barking of dogs, the high, grating creak of iron signs swinging precariously above your head on rusty hinges. And the voices, hundreds of voices, talking, shouting, singing, arguing, praying, all at once in a dozen different accents you cannot place. You are inside now. The heavy leaf of the gate groans and slams shut behind you. The sound is final, a heavy thud that vibrates through the soles of your feet. It is the sound of a trap snapping shut. You are locked in. You will not be able to leave until dawn the next day. Your survival for the next 24 hours depends entirely on your ability to understand and navigate this new, hostile, and utterly alien environment.
You take your first tentative steps into the city proper, and the world you knew disappears, replaced by a canyon of wood and plaster. Your first challenge, the most fundamental of all, is simply to put one foot in front of the other. But the ground is not a reliable surface. It is hard-packed earth, compacted by centuries of footfall, but made soft and treacherous by constant dampness. Down the center of the street, perhaps only 15 feet wide, runs the central stream. It is not clear water, but a cesspool, a thick, almost black mud in which float vegetable peelings, strands of soiled straw, and things your mind refuses to identify. A fermenting smell emanates from it, pungent and sour. Your only option is to hug the walls. You walk across a slightly drier strip of land, barely a foot wide, flattening yourself against the cold, rough walls of the houses. Each step is a micro-decision, a calculation of risk. Your gaze is constantly fixed on the ground, scanning the surface for the stone that might spin under your weight, the pool of stagnant water that hides a deeper pit, the particularly slippery patch of mud that might send you sprawling into the gutter. You feel a constant tension in your ankles and knees, a constant readiness to jump or catch yourself. The walls you press against are a mixture of rough plaster and dark oak beams. They are cold, oozing with damp, even though the sun shines somewhere high above this ravine. The houses themselves crush you. They are built with wooden frames, the spaces between the beams filled with a mixture of mud, straw, and animal hair known as cob. Each successive floor is built to protrude slightly beyond the one below, a technique called cantilevering. It's a clever way to maximize living space in a crowded city, but its effect on the street below is profoundly oppressive. On the second floor, the overhangs are so pronounced that the upper floors almost touch their neighbors across the narrow street. This creates a permanent twilight, blocking out daylight and trapping the air, which becomes heavy and stagnant. The sky is reduced to a thin, jagged ribbon high above, a distant, inaccessible blue. You feel as if you're walking down an artificial gorge, where sounds ricochet and amplify. The smell, which was already overwhelming at the gates, now differentiates into 100 specific, localized scents. You approach a shop, and a new wave of olfactory waves washes over you. It's the metallic, coppery smell of fresh blood mixed with the faint sweetish odor of meat beginning to turn sour. It's a butcher's shop. The shop has no front, just a large opening onto the street. A beef carcass hangs from a hook, and the butcher, a massive man with arms covered in dried blood, cuts it with sweeping strokes of his cleaver. A few steps further, the smell changes radically. It's the acrid aroma of boiled cabbage and the smell of rancid fat escaping from a dive. And everywhere, that constant background odor, human and animal. A group of filthy snouted pigs, probably belonging to a local resident, rummages through a pile of garbage at your feet, grunting with satisfaction when they find a discarded vegetable peeling. Chickens, thin and swift, peck between your legs, unperturbed by the human traffic. You have to constantly watch where you're putting your feet. Suddenly, a high-pitched scream comes from a window high above. A woman's voice, shrill and indifferent. "Watch out for the water!" You have only a split second to comprehend the warning. You don't even have time to think, only to react on pure instinct, throwing yourself against the rough plaster of a wall. A cascade of yellowish, nauseating liquid crashes to the floor exactly where you stood a moment before, with a sickening splash. You watch as the liquid joins the central stream, adding its own contribution to the surrounding stench. Someone on a higher floor has just emptied their chamber pot. It's a common, accepted practice, part of the city's morning routine. You've just escaped your first Parisian baptism, but the near miss leaves your heart pounding and a bitter taste in your mouth. The noise is a solid wall, a physical pressure against your eardrums. There is no silence, not even for a second. Every shop is open to the street, its activities spilling into the public space like an open wound. You approach a blacksmith's forge.
Having fortified yourself with the small piece of coarse bread, you know you cannot linger. The city is a river, And to stand still is to be an obstacle, to draw unwanted attention. You decide to press on towards the place you have heard mentioned by other travelers, the beating heart of the city, the Grand Market, known as Les Halles. The journey there is an education in itself, a descent into the specialized, pungent worlds of the city's guilds. You leave the relative width of the main street and plunge into a labyrinth of even narrower alleyways. Here the upper floors of the houses almost touch, creating dark, damp tunnels where the sun never reaches and sound echoes unnervingly. Each of these alleys seems dedicated to a specific trade, and each has its own unique and overwhelming sensory profile. You turn into the street of the tanners. The smell hits you first, a physical blow. It is the sharp, acrid stench of ammonia, derived from the stale urine used to treat the animal hides. It burns your eyes and makes you gag. You see the tanners themselves, strong men with leather aprons stained dark with their trade. They work in open-fronted shops, their arms submerged up to the elbow in great wooden vats, scraping the hair from the sodden grayish skins. The ground here is perpetually wet, soaked with the foul liquids of the tanning process. You hurry past, holding a corner of your sleeve over your mouth and nose, your eyes watering. You escape that street only to turn into the street of the dyers. Here the air is thick with steam and the chemical smell of mordants, the substances used to fix the colors to the cloth. Great vats of liquid, some a vibrant blue from the woad plant, others a rich crimson from madder root, bubble over small fires. Brightly colored cloths hang from every window and are stretched on frames in the street, dripping green, red, and blue onto the ground below, staining the mud with strange psychedelic patterns. The dyers, their hands and arms stained with the colors of their trade, stir the vats with long wooden poles, their faces impassive in the swirling colored steam. Finally, after what feels like an eternity of navigating these specialized, suffocating corridors, you emerge onto a vast, open square. The sudden light and space are a shock. This is Les Halles. The sheer scale of the market is overwhelming. It is an explosion of life and chaos. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of people are shouting, haggling, and pushing. The stalls are set up with no apparent order, a sprawling organic mass of commerce that fills every inch of the square. You try to forge a path through the throng, keeping one hand on your small bag at all times, your body tense. Your senses are assaulted from every direction. You approach the fishmonger's stalls. Fresh fish, caught that morning from the Seine, is a rare luxury displayed for the wealthy. But most of what you see is the food of preservation. Barrels are piled high with salted herring, their silver scales dulled by the salt, giving off a powerful, pungent sea smell that clings to the back of your throat. Great flat slabs of dried cod, hard as wooden planks, are stacked like firewood. The fishmonger, a large woman with strong reddened arms and a voice that could outshout a town crier, is gutting a fish with a few deft, brutal movements of her knife, throwing the entrails into a bucket at her feet. You move on, drawn by the sound of cleavers. You are at the butcher's stalls. Whole carcasses of pigs and sheep hang from iron hooks, their vacant eyes staring into nothing. The butchers, their aprons soaked in blood, hack at the meat on massive wooden blocks, their surfaces worn into deep curves from centuries of use. Swarms of black flies buzz around the hanging meat, a living, shimmering cloud. The butchers throw scraps, fat and bones directly onto the ground, where stray dogs, thin and wiry with their ribs showing, fight over them with low, vicious growls. The ground here is not mud, but a dark, greasy slick of old blood and fat. You linger for a moment before an apothecary's stall, a place of strange wonders and quiet menace.
Dried herbs hang in bunches from the awning over his head. Chamomile, lavender, and mint, their dusty medicinal scent mixing with the surrounding odors. But there are others, more sinister-looking plants as well. Nightshade with its dark berries, and what looks like a mandrake root, shaped disturbingly like a small, twisted human. On the table, in a chaotic jumble, are earthenware jars containing mysterious powders, strange colored stones, and even dried animals, lizards, snakes, and what looks like a desiccated frog. The man, small and hunched, with ink-stained fingers and eyes that seem to see more than they should, promises you remedies for all ailments, from a toothache to a broken heart, from the plague to demonic possession. He whispers of theriac, the universal antidote, a complex concoction of dozens of ingredients. His eyes are shifty, and you suspect his cures are more hope than substance. You move on, a slight shiver running down your spine. You pass a stall selling cheese, the smell sharp and tangy, from soft, fresh cheeses to hard, aged wheels. Another stall sells nothing but rope, of every thickness and length. Another sells simple wooden bowls and spoons, carved from a light, pale wood. Each stall is a world unto itself, a tiny kingdom of commerce. You begin to overhear snippets of conversation, the sound of 1,000 lives intersecting in this one chaotic place. A woman complains bitterly about the price of wheat. Two men, their faces flushed with ale, argue loudly about a debt. A child, separated from its mother, cries with a heartbreaking wail. You are an invisible ghost, drifting through the intimate dramas of people you will never see again.
You have navigated the world of goods, the landscape of smells and wares. Now you must navigate the most dangerous terrain of all, the people. The market is not just a place of commerce. It is a social theater, a stage where power, poverty, and desperation play out their roles in plain sight. The air itself seems thick with human presence, a mixture of breath, sweat, and unspoken intentions. You stand near a stall selling rough-spun linen, and for a moment you just watch. The crowd is not a collection of individuals. It is a single living organism. It flows like a sluggish river with currents and eddies. You feel its physical pressure against you, a constant shifting weight. There is no concept of personal space here. You are shoulder to shoulder with strangers, their bodies brushing against yours without a thought. You can smell the sour ale on the breath of the man beside you, the scent of wood smoke in a woman's hair, the faint but unmistakable odor of fear and sweat. You learn to stand your ground, to brace yourself against the flow, lest you be swept away into the thickest part of the throng. It is here that you truly learn the hierarchy of the city. A wealthy man, perhaps a cloth merchant, judging by his fine wool coat trimmed with fur, approaches. He is not a nobleman, but his wealth gives him a similar authority. He walks with a sense of purpose, his chin held high, two sturdy servants clearing a path before him, their hands pushing lesser folk aside with casual disdain. The crowd parts as if by magic. Peasants, laborers, and even other merchants press themselves back to let him pass, their eyes lowered in a show of deference or resentment. He does not acknowledge them. He does not even seem to see them. They are simply not part of his world. His passage is a silent, powerful lesson in the importance of coin. A moment later, a different kind of power asserts itself, one based on steel and birthright. A sharp cry rings out, cutting through the general din, a voice accustomed to being obeyed. "Make way for the Lord! Make way!" Two men-at-arms, wearing the livery of a noble house, a blue and gold check, pushed their way through the crowd, using the butts of their heavy spears to shove people aside, with no pretense of gentleness.
Behind them, a knight in light, polished armor rides a tall, powerful war horse. The horse is a magnificent beast, but it is agitated by the crowd, its eyes wide and white, its hoofs clattering nervously on the packed earth, sending small clods of mud flying. The knight sits straight and proud in his saddle, his gaze fixed forward, over the heads of the common folk. A look of profound disdain is etched on his face, a mixture of arrogance and disgust for the unwashed humanity that surrounds him. His squire follows closely behind on a smaller horse, carrying his lord's helmet and shield. You press yourself against a stall selling turnips, the rough wood of the stall digging into your back to avoid being trampled by the massive iron-shod hooves. The procession passes, a brief, arrogant display of force, leaving a wake of fear, resentment, and muttered curses in the crowd. Your attention is then drawn to a small, intense drama unfolding nearby. A well-dressed merchant, his face plump and prosperous, suddenly shouts, his voice a high-pitched squeal of outrage. He slaps frantically at his belt, where a moment ago a heavy leather purse had hung. "My purse! By the saints, my purse is gone!" he cries. His panicked eyes dart around and fix upon the man standing next to him, a scruffy-looking laborer with a bewildered expression and clothes patched beyond recognition. "Yoo-hoo! You took it!" the merchant shrieks, grabbing the front of the laborer's tunic. "I did no such thing, master, I swear on my mother's grave," the laborer protests, his face flushing with a mixture of anger and raw fear. An argument erupts. Their voices rise, drawing a small, eager crowd. People love a spectacle, especially one that might end in violence. They form a tight, jostling circle around the two men, craning their necks to see, their faces filled with morbid curiosity. But as your eyes scan the edge of the group, you notice something else. A young boy, no older than 10, with a thin, grimy face and quick, darting eyes like a cornered animal, is slipping away from the back of the crowd. He does not run. He moves with a fluid, practiced ease, turning sideways to slip through gaps, melting into the larger throng like a shadow dissolving into water. He does not look back. You have just witnessed the true art of the cut purse. The loud public argument between the merchant and the laborer is merely a distraction, a piece of theater designed to draw all eyes while the real crime happens unnoticed. No one else seems to have seen the boy. It is the law of the city. Vigilance is your only protection. You instinctively clutch your small, nearly empty bag tighter against your chest. The feel of the single remaining coin as a small, hard knot of anxiety. The constant stimulation, the need for perpetual alertness is exhausting, and your thirst, once a minor annoyance, is now becoming a real torment. Your throat feels like sandpaper. Your tongue feels thick and clumsy in your dry mouth. Your gourd has been empty for hours. But where to find water? You know that the water from the Seine, which flows nearby, is a death trap. You saw its murky brown surface earlier, slick with refuse. It is the receptacle for all the city's waste, the offal from the butchers, the chemicals from the dyers, the raw sewage from thousands of households. To drink from it is to guarantee sickness, a fever and a flux of the bowels that could easily carry you off. There are public wells, but they are rare, and you see one at the far end of the square. It's a focal point of intense social activity. A long queue of 20 or more people, mostly women and children carrying wooden buckets, are already waiting, their faces tired and impatient. Arguments break out in the line over whose turn it is. You watch as a woman finally gets to the front. The stone around the well is worn into deep grooves by the ropes of centuries. The rope itself is thick, slimy, and dark with grime. She lowers a bucket into the dark shaft. The effort of pulling it back up is immense, her back straining, her muscles trembling. The water she pours into her own bucket is not clear. It is murky, a pale brownish color with small specks of debris floating in it. It's better than the river, but it is far from clean. You imagine the 1,000 mouths that have touched that bucket, the 1,000 hands that have touched that rope. You see the water carriers. They are strong, muscular men with their shoulders permanently hunched from their trade, carrying 2 heavy buckets suspended from a wooden yoke. They move through the crowd with a steady, practiced gait, shouting their trade, "Clear water! Fresh spring water!" They sell clean ontos drawn from springs upstream, far from the city's pollution. But their service comes at a price. You watch a wealthy woman's servant buy a bucketful. The price exchanged is more than you possess in the entire world. That water is not for you. You decide with a heavy heart that you must wait. You will endure the thirst. It is a small suffering compared to the risks of the well water or the cost of the carrier's spring water. You turn away from the well, your mouth dry, and begin to think about the next and most dangerous part of your day, the coming of night and the desperate search for shelter.
The sun, which you have not seen directly for hours, begins its slow descent. You do not see a sunset, a glorious spectacle of orange and purple. Instead, the thin ribbon of sky visible between the overhanging houses simply begins to fail. The pale gray light thickens, turning to a deeper, bruised purple, then to the color of slate. The shadows, which were sharp and defined at midday, now stretch and merge. They lose their edges, swallowing details and creating an atmosphere of deep uncertainty. Corners that were once just corners now seem like dark, waiting mouths. Doorways become voids of absolute blackness. The city is transforming, shedding its daytime skin for a more dangerous nocturnal one. A new kind of activity begins in the streets, a frantic final flurry before the darkness claims everything. The daytime merchants, the bakers, the cloth sellers, the coopers are packing up. You watch the weary, practiced movements of a woman dismantling her vegetable stall. She loads her unsold turnips and carrots back into a wicker basket, her face a mask of exhaustion, her movements quick and efficient, born of long habit. The heavy wooden shutters of the shops are pulled across the open fronts, the sound of their clatter echoing in the cooling air, a series of definitive, percussive sounds that signal the end of the day's commerce. They are replaced by the sellers of the night, figures who seem to emerge from the growing shadows. A man with a handcart filled with oysters, slick and gray in the dim light, begins his cry, his voice hoarse and echoing strangely in the emptying street. "Oysters, fresh from the coast," he calls, though the coast is many days' journey away. Another vendor sets up a small brazier, the glowing coals casting a warm orange light on his face. He sells roasted chestnuts, and the smell of the smoke and the sweet roasting nuts is a brief pleasant counterpoint to the city's usual foul perfume. A woman sells hot spiced wine from a steaming cauldron, the aroma of cinnamon, cloves, and hot ale, a fleeting, expensive luxury you cannot afford. But there is an edge to this new activity, a sense of urgency. These are fleeting comforts before the true darkness falls. Then it begins. It is not a gentle chime, but a heavy, commanding, relentless toll from the bell tower of the nearest church. Bong! 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 The sound is deep and resonant, a wave of bronze that washes over the entire city, seeming to vibrate in your very bones. It is the curfew, a sound of authority and finality. The effect is immediate and striking. The city transforms. Any remaining merchants scramble to close up shop. The oyster seller douses his lamp. The woman selling wine quickly packs away her ladle. Doors slam shut all around you, the sound of heavy wooden bars and iron bolts sliding into place, echoing down the alleyways. People who were lingering in the street, perhaps finishing a conversation, now hurry, their faces set with a new purpose. They do not walk, they scurry, keeping to the shadows, their eyes darting nervously. In a matter of minutes, the bustling streets become eerily, unnaturally empty. Only a few latecomers run.
their footsteps loud on the packed earth, desperate to get home before they are locked out. You understand with a chilling certainty that to be caught outside now is not just unwise, it is to be an outlaw. The city gates, your only escape, are now barred and locked until morning. The trap is sprung. You are inside, and the night belongs to others. You must find shelter. Your eyes scan the street, now a corridor of dark, silent facades. The only light comes from the occasional sliver of candlelight peeking through a poorly fitted shutter high above. You search for an inn sign, a symbol of refuge. You see one, a faded wooden board hanging from a rusty iron bracket creaking in the evening breeze. It depicts a swan, but the paint is so peeled and faded that it looks more like a pale ghost. The building itself sags, leaning against its neighbor as if for support. Its timber frame is crooked and dark with age. It does not look inviting. But it is your only option. With a deep breath, you push open the heavy, creaking door. The interior is even darker and smokier than the street. You are hit by a blast of heat and a wall of sound and smell. The common room is a small, low-ceilinged space, lit by a few smoky tallow candles that give off more soot than light, and a heavy wooden bars and iron bolts sliding into place, echoing down the alleyways. People who were lingering in the street, perhaps finishing a conversation, now hurry, their faces set with a new purpose. They do not walk, they scurry, keeping to the shadows, their eyes darting nervously. In a matter of minutes, the bustling streets become eerily, unnaturally empty. Only a few latecomers run, their footsteps loud on the packed earth, desperate to get home before they are locked out. You understand with a chilling certainty that to be caught outside now is not just unwise, it is to be an outlaw. The city gates, your only escape, are now barred and locked until morning. The trap is sprung. You are inside, and the night belongs to others. You must find shelter. Your eyes scan the street, now a corridor of dark, silent facades. The only light comes from the occasional sliver of candlelight peeking through a poorly fitted shutter high above. You search for an inn sign, a symbol of refuge. You see one, a faded wooden board hanging from a rusty iron bracket creaking in the evening breeze. It depicts a swan, but the paint is so peeled and faded that it looks more like a pale ghost. The building itself sags, leaning against its neighbor as if for support. Its timber frame is crooked and dark with age. It does not look inviting. But it is your only option. With a deep breath, you push open the heavy, creaking door. The interior is even darker and smokier than the street. You are hit by a blast of heat and a wall of sound and smell. The common room is a small, low-ceilinged space, lit by a few smoky tallow candles that give off more soot than light, and a dying fire in a vast stone hearth. The air is thick with stale ale, unwashed bodies, wet wool, and old, cold smoke. A dozen men are hunched over rough-hewn tables, their faces illuminated in the flickering, unreliable light. They are not friendly travelers. Their faces are hard, scarred. You see a discharged soldier, his face bearing a long white scar. You see a man who might be a river bargee, his hands thick and calloused. You see a nervous-looking merchant trying to make himself small in a corner. They drink from wooden tankards and talk in low, guttural tones. The moment you enter, all conversation stops. All eyes turn to you. You are praised, judged. Your poverty and your status as a stranger are assessed in a single hostile silence. The innkeeper, a massive man with a ruddy face, a tangled beard, and a stained leather apron, wipes the counter with a dirty rag. He does not greet you. He simply stares. "What do you want?" he grunts, his voice a low rumble. "A bed for the night," you say, your own voice sounding small and weak in the sudden quiet. He looks you up and down, his gaze lingering on your small travel bag. He is calculating what little you might have. He says, "Payment first." The price he names is exorbitant, enough to feed you for a week in the countryside. But you see the hard, unyielding look in his eyes and know that this is not a negotiation. You are at his mercy. You pull out your few remaining coins, their metallic feel a sad reminder of your dwindling resources, and place them on the splintered wooden counter. He sweeps them into a drawer without a word. "Upstairs," he says, jerking his thumb towards a dark, narrow staircase in the corner of the room. "And no trouble." It is both a direction and a threat. Stepping out of the inn, the chill morning air bites at your exposed skin, but it's quickly replaced by the familiar thick blanket of city smells: damp earth, wood smoke, unwashed bodies, and the ever-present cloying scent of decay. The streets, though still in the long, cool shadows of dawn, are already bustling. You're swept into the flow of humanity, a river of people with purpose, and you, an aimless leaf, are buffeted by the current. Your first, most urgent need is food. The hunger pangs that gnawed at you all night are now a sharp, insistent ache. You eye the few street vendors who've set up early. A woman selling small gray loaves of bread from a wicker basket. Another hawking tepid, thin gruel from a steaming pot. The prices she calls out are a punch to the gut. Even the smallest portion would consume most of your remaining coins. You calculate desperately, a single meal or a chance at a day's work. The latter, however slim, is the only path to sustained survival. You must find work. But where to look? The medieval city offers few easy entry points for a lone, unskilled stranger. Your mind races, recalling snippets of conversation from the road, whispers from the market. You know of a few options, each fraught with its own set of dangers. Your first instinct draws you towards the river, the lifeblood of any great city. The docks are always a place of frantic activity, a hub for raw muscle and quick pay. You navigate the labyrinthine alleys, following the distant calls of bargemen and the smell of wet wood and fish. As you approach, the noise intensifies, the rhythmic thump-thump of heavy barrels being rolled, the creak and groan of loading cranes, the guttural shouts of men coordinating their efforts. The air is thick with their grunts of effort, the splashing of the river, and the pungent smell of bilge water. You approach a group of men gathered near a pile of logs, awaiting instructions. A foreman, a squat man with eyes like flint and a club tucked into his belt, surveys the scene. You ask, your voice a little shaky, if there's work. He looks you up and down, his gaze lingering on your slender frame, your softer hands. He scoffs. "We need men, not boys." "Can you carry 200 weight without collapsing?" he challenges, pointing to a stack of heavy sacks. The implicit threat is clear. Fail, and you get nothing, or worse, a beating. The pay, he grudgingly admits, is a meager few pennies for a full day of back-breaking labor, barely enough for a meal and a cheap bed. And there's no guarantee of work tomorrow. This is a place where men break their bodies for crumbs. The risk of injury is high, and an injured laborer is a dead laborer in this city. You pull back, the sheer physical impossibility of the task weighing on you more than the sacks themselves. Another option, the more respected path, is to seek work in one of the guild houses. These are the centers of skilled trades: carpenters, masons, blacksmiths, weavers. You seek out the street of the blacksmiths, drawn by the rhythmic clang-clang-clang of hammers on anvils. The heat is palpable even from the street, and the air smells of cold smoke and hot metal. You find a smithy, its front open to the street, revealing the glowing forge and the powerful soot-stained smith at work. He is a master of his craft, shaping red-hot iron with confident, precise blows. You approach tentatively and ask if he has a need for an apprentice or a journeyman. He barely looks up from his work, the sweat glistening on his face. Apprentices must be bound, he grunts, his voice rough. And journeymen must prove their skill, show their papers, and be known to the guild. He dismisses you with a wave of his hand back to his iron. You realize the truth. Without a connection, without years of training, without belonging to a guild, you are an outsider. These are closed shops protected by centuries of tradition. They have no place for a vagabond like you. The few specialized skills you might possess from your village life are useless here, unrecognized, uncertified. As the morning wears on, your options dwindle, and a sense of growing despair begins to creep in. Your stomach cramps with hunger. You find yourself drifting towards the less formal, more desperate areas of the market, where men of all stripes gather hoping for any odd job. This is the casual labor market, the lowest rung on the ladder of medieval employment. Here you see men offering to carry water from the public wells, their wooden yokes heavy on their shoulders. Others, with buckets and rudimentary brooms, offer to sweep courtyards or clear refuse. A group of desperate souls stands near a construction site, hoping to be picked to haul stones or mix mortar, their faces gaunt, their clothes in tatters. You overhear a conversation. A man, slightly better dressed than the rest, is looking for someone to help him unload a cart of furs. The work is temporary, the pay minimal, but it is work. You step forward, eager, ready to offer your services, but as you open your mouth, another, larger man with a scar similar to the innkeeper's pushes past you, speaking first, more forcefully. "I'll do it, master, strong as an ox." The merchant eyes the bigger man, then you, and makes his choice. You are too thin, too obviously weak. You are overlooked, invisible. The reality hits you with the force of a physical blow. In this city, your very appearance, your lack of robust health, your obvious poverty marks you as a liability. You are competing against desperate men who have known hardship all their lives, men willing to work for less, capable of more. You are not just hungry, you are becoming an undesirable, a potential burden. As the sun rises higher, beginning to pierce the urban canyons, the familiar smells of the market, the butcher's blood, the tanner's urine, the dyer's chemicals seem to intensify, pressing down on you. You've walked for hours, your feet aching anew, your hunger a constant companion. You are no closer to earning a single coin, and your few remaining pennies are still tucked away, a desperate reserve for a choice you haven't had to make yet. Eat, or find a place to sleep tonight. You cannot afford both. You must find a way to earn, or your survival will not extend beyond the setting of this day's sun.
The sun climbs higher, an indifferent eye in the pale sky, casting sharper, albeit still broken light into the narrow streets. Your stomach, now a constant, hollow ache, feels like it's trying to consume itself. Every passing scent of food, a baker's fresh bread, the rich aroma of roasting meat from a wealthy merchant's house, is a torment, twisting the knot of hunger deeper. You've walked the formal avenues of labor and found only closed doors, the polite but firm rejections echoing in your head. Now, the city's underbelly, the desperate fringe where the rules bend or break, begins to call to you with an insidious promise of relief. Your eyes, once scanning for work notices or a friendly face, now involuntarily track the vulnerable. You see a plump, well-dressed merchant, his purse heavy at his belt, struggling through the crowd, his back turned for a moment as he haggles over a bolt of cloth. A quick, violent impulse flickers through your mind, an unspeakable thought born of raw hunger and primal fear. It's the thought of a swift grab, a dash into the nearest alley. You push it down for now. Violence is a desperate gamble, and the city's justice, when it catches you, is swift and brutal. A public hanging, a severed hand nailed to a market post, these are common, grotesque spectacles meant as deterrents.
The memory of the woman losing her egg at the gate and the unfeeling guard flashes in your mind. No, not yet. You drift towards the more disreputable corners of the market, where the usual commerce gives way to shadier dealings. The legitimate stalls grow sparse, replaced by ramshackle carts selling suspicious tonics or salvaged goods. You pass by gambling dens, mere hovels where men with desperate eyes throw dice onto grimy tables, their fortunes rising and falling with each clatter. The air inside is thick with stale pipe smoke, the sharp tang of cheap ale, and the palpable scent of anxiety. A few are winning, their raucous laughs jarring against the general despair. Most are losing, their faces etched with the stark lines of ruin. You watch, fascinated and repelled, as a man pushes his last coin across the table, his hand trembling, only to watch it disappear into the pile of the house. This is a quick way to lose what little you have, or, if luck smiles, to gain just enough to survive another day. But luck is a fickle mistress, and you, a stranger, feel its absence keenly. Further on you glimpse the veiled entrances of what can only be brothels. Laughter, too loud and forced, spills out, mixed with the cloying scent of cheap perfume and something else, something sad and desperate, a hint of human misery disguised as pleasure. Women, their faces painted too brightly in the dim light, their eyes holding an ancient weariness, stand in doorways, murmuring low, practiced invitations. This, too, is a form of commerce, a grim exchange for coins. You avert your gaze, a wave of discomfort washing over you. Such places are not for you, but they are a stark reminder of the lengths to which some are driven for survival, and the constant, visible presence of desperation. Then you spot them, the runners or catchers. These are the lowest of the low, men and women who perform odd, often unsavory jobs for a pittance, existing in the liminal space between honest labor and outright crime. One such figure, a thin, wiry man with shifty eyes and a perpetual stoop, leans against a wall near the docks, observing the flow of people with a predatory stillness. He calls out in a low voice, almost a whisper that barely carries over the din. Need a hand? A strong back? A pair of ears? Discreet work for a quick coin? He's looking for desperate souls, like you, to do the work no one else wants or dares to do. You approach him cautiously, your instincts screaming for retreat, but your stomach screaming louder for sustenance. Work, you manage, your voice hoarse from lack of water and a night of anxiety. He eyes you with a mixture of suspicion and a flicker of something close to pity, recognizing the desperation in your posture. What can you do, country mouse? Can you lift? Can you be quiet? Can you not ask too many questions when the master tells you to fetch something lost? His words are laced with dark implication, each phrase a moral tightrope. He talks of carrying messages through dangerous alleys, of helping to retrieve lost goods, a thinly veiled euphemism for petty theft or fencing, or even, chillingly, of disposing of certain things, no questions asked. The pay would be abysmal, barely enough for a single meal, but it would be immediate. The risks, however, are immense. A quick blade in a dark alley, a wrongful accusation from a disgruntled victim, falling afoul of the wrong gang, or worse, becoming entangled with the city guard, who might hang you for the mere association. This is the precipice of the underworld, where one wrong step can seal your fate. Your mind races, weighing the moral cost against the desperate gnawing in your belly. Is this the line you are willing to cross for a few coins?
The city has stripped away your illusions, but it is now testing your core. The options presented are not about skill, but about desperation, about a willingness to compromise, to disappear into the shadows, to become part of the city's grim, hidden machinery. As the midday sun finally breaks through the higher reaches of the buildings, casting brief, bright patches on the muddy ground, you realize the stark reality. Survival in this city is not about finding an honest job, but about adapting to its brutal economy, even if it means sacrificing your principles piece by piece just to see another dawn. You have survived your first day in a medieval city. You arrived with romantic notions, perhaps, of grand castles and noble deeds, but the reality has been a relentless assault on your senses and your spirit. You have endured the suffocating stench, the deafening noise, the claustrophobic streets. You have navigated the suspicion of guards, the avarice of merchants, and the contempt of the powerful. You have felt the gnawing pangs of hunger and the cold dread of an exposed night. This is not the end of your journey, but merely the end of your beginning. The city has tested you, stripping away your innocence and your preconceptions. It has shown you its brutal underbelly, its indifference to individual suffering, and the harsh calculus of its survival. You have learned that every shadow holds a potential threat, that every interaction is a negotiation of power, and that your own life holds little value to anyone but yourself. The medieval city is not a fairy tale. It is a crucible. You have faced its challenges, pushed its boundaries, and glimpsed the dark choices it demands. The sun will set again, and the night will bring its own dangers. But for now, you stand, battered but unbroken, on the threshold of a new understanding. Your survival, moving forward, will not depend on luck, but on your ability to adapt, to observe, and perhaps to become a little less of who you were, and a little more of what this city demands. This is your survival guide, and your first day is far from over.
Forget everything you think you know about fairy tale castles and romantic cobblestone streets. Forget the images of knights in shining armor and ladies in flowing gowns. The first thing that would have struck you upon approaching a medieval city was not its beauty, but its smell. A suffocating, physical wave of wood smoke, of human sweat, of animal excrement, and of 1,000 forms of decaying waste. It is a smell that would have caught you by the throat long before you ever passed through its gates, a warning of the dense, chaotic, and dangerous world that lay within. Tonight, we are not taking a tour of a museum. We are not admiring architecture. We are going to a tent to survive. We will learn, step by step, why every shadow held a potential threat, why a simple drink of water could be a death sentence, and why the setting of the sun, for a stranger, was the most terrifying event of all. This is your survival guide for your first and perhaps your last day in a medieval city. Now, before we step through the gates and you get settled for good, if you enjoy this kind of immersive journey into the past, please take a moment to leave a like on the video and to subscribe. Only do so if you find real value in what I do here. I would also love to know what part of the world you're watching from and what time it is where you are, so feel free to let me know in the comments. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. All right, the time has come. Find your most comfortable position. Dim the lights. Let the noise of the modern world fade away and allow yourself to drift, to slip back in time. Our story, your story, begins on a dusty road in the year of our Lord 1348. You have walked for days, your feet aching, your clothes covered in the dust of the road. And finally, there it is, rising on the horizon, the great city of Paris. For hours it has been a smudge on the horizon, a promise as vague as a half-remembered dream, indistinguishable from a low-lying cloud. But now, as the afternoon sun begins its slow descent, painting the sky in softer shades of gold and pale blue, the city resolves itself into something solid, something real. The silhouette is a jagged line of towers and rooftops against the sky, a man-made mountain range of stone and timber. It is a promise of food, of shelter, of civilization after days spent in the lonely open countryside, where the only sounds were the wind in the dry grass and the soft crunch of your own footsteps on the path. But with every step that brings you closer, with every slow mile that passes, the promise transforms and the details of reality begin to sharpen. The romantic vision of a city of white stone, born from songs and the tales of traveling storytellers, gives way to a harsher truth. The walls, so majestic from afar, reveal their scars up close. They are not a uniform white, but a mottled patchwork of gray and brown stone. Some blocks weathered and dark with age, others lighter, newer. You see evidence of repairs from some forgotten siege, newer stones set crudely against the old, a testament to the city's violent past. Dark, damp patches of green moss cling to the lower courses, a sign of perpetual dampness that seems to crawl up from the moat below. At the top of the walls, the silhouettes of the guards on their rounds become distinct. You can make out the shape of their helmets, the glint of the sun on the tip of a spear. They pace back and forth along the battlements, their movements mechanical and ceaseless, a part of the architecture, indifferent to your approach. The dirt path you have been following for days, a simple track between fallow fields, grows wider, more crowded. You are no longer alone. You are absorbed into a continuous, slow-moving stream of humanity, all converging on this single point. An ox cart, its wooden wheels ungreased and screaming with every agonizing turn, slowly overtakes you. The sound is like a physical pain in your ears. It kicks up a cloud of fine, choking dust that forces you to turn your head and cover your mouth with a sleeve. The peasant leading the oxen doesn't give you a glance. His face is a map of wrinkles and resignation, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, his shoulders slumped with a lifetime of labor. His cart is piled high with cabbages and turnips, the smell of earth clinging to them. Further on, a group of pilgrims, their staffs striking the ground in a soft, rhythmic beat, walk while muttering prayers. Their eyes are fixed on the church spires that pierce the sky above the walls, their expressions a mixture of weariness and ecstatic hope. Their clothes are worn, their faces etched with a piety that seems as much about endurance as it is about faith. A lone messenger on a tired, sweating horse pushes past you and all, his face grim with the importance of his message, shouting for people to make way. He is a reminder that this city is a center of power, a place of urgent news and great consequence. And then the smell hits you. It does not arrive all at once. It comes in waves carried on the breeze. The first note is that of smoke, a general hazy smell of thousands of wood fires, the kind you might find pleasant in a single hearth, but here it is a thick, choking blanket that covers everything. It is the smell of a city breathing out its own fumes. Then, as you draw closer, a more organic, more animal note weaves its way in. It is the smell of thousands of living beings, human and beast, crammed together in a space too small. It is the smell of stables, of pigsties, of chicken coops, which are not outside the city, but inside, in the tiny courtyards, sometimes even on the ground floors of the houses themselves. You can smell the sharp tang of manure, the cloying scent of unwashed wool and sweat. Finally, as you come within a few hundred paces of the gate, The lowest, most persistent note of the city symphony reaches you, the smell of decay. It is the smell of waste thrown from windows into the street, of sewage flowing in open gutters, of the offal and blood from the butcher's stalls. It is the smell of everything fermenting and rotting under the sun. It is a smell that's so thick, so potent, you can almost taste it, a foul coating on your tongue that makes you want to retch. This is the true perfume of the medieval city, an olfactory wall you must pass through before you even reach the one made of stone.